and we'll get started on our next presentation with Medality Medical with Larry Hirsch.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Larry Hirsch. I am the Chief Medical Advisor for Medality Medical, and this is about pursuing a really novel approach to reversing type 2 diabetes. The lawyers asked me to show this slide. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the usual warnings and precautions that nobody in a regulatory or other position or finance position has reviewed or approved these statements. So our overall objective with you today is first to raise awareness about this and to hopefully stimulate interest in perhaps helping support our ongoing investigational clinical trial of the company's patented and proprietary surgical device/system, which we call HydraSolve, and the associated costs. And I want to be clear that HydraSolve is already FDA cleared for subcutaneous fat removal. Sorry, I didn't have it on slideshow. For subcutaneous fat removal, but we are seeking FDA clearance for a new indication for use, namely visceral fat removal. The type 2 diabetes pandemic, I think everybody is familiar with. Over 460 million adults with diabetes worldwide based on the IDF surveys in 2019. The prevalence is increasing, and over 90% are believed to have type 2 diabetes. Domestically, it's about 25 plus million American adults have been diagnosed with type 2, and there are another 88 kind of waiting in the wings with pre-diabetes, and almost 90% of these people are overweight or obese. It's an expensive and resource-consuming condition. The average per patient costs are nearly 2.5 times higher than those without diabetes. Now, simple question is, is it possible to disrupt the cycle? And the basic answer is that while there are trials that have shown that intensive lifestyle management do work, they are intense and they take resources that are really not widely available to practitioners, even endocrinologists. Will Cefalu, who's now the head of the NIDDK, presented an oral abstract at the ADA 2 years ago and showed that within 6 months, about 44% of patients who are prescribed anti-hyperglycemic meds discontinue that therapy, and it's nearly 60% within 12 months. Not a very good track record. Bariatric surgery has become increasingly sought or performed. And this does lead to reversal of type 2, but it requires a certain level of obesity. It's a major procedure. You need post-op care. And most importantly, once you've had this, you must modify your dietary habits and take nutritional supplements lifelong. That is not a choice. So there are no known therapies except those that we're developing in Medality that directly remove visceral fat, which is a cause of insulin resistance, which then subsequently leads to type 2 and its associated complications. So what about visceral fat? Well, this is fat that is located deep within the abdomen. We all know the phenotype of the beer belly, the paunch, hanging over the waist or the belt. This fat is metabolically active. It secretes a wide array of adipokines that influence hunger, satiety, insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and so forth. Interestingly, in animals with very difficult surgical procedures, removal of this fat has been linked to reversing insulin resistance, which is very exciting. But up until now, this really has not been even a consideration in humans. Why is this? Well, the anatomy of visceral fat is challenging in terms of surgical approach. The mesentery in particular, which is highlighted here, has a rich supply of both arterial and venous vessels, lymphatics, nerves, and so forth. So traditional surgery is really not viable, and neither are other sort of energy type high energy approaches, including radio frequency, ultrasound, electroscalpel, and so forth. The critical point that I want to get across here is that our technology, which I'll describe in a moment, successfully addresses these very important challenges, and it's believed to be the only surgical energy source that can extract adipose tissue without affecting adjacent tissues. We call this MVL, or mesenteric visceral lipectomy. So what is this technology? Well, it's invented by our Chief Scientific Officer, Mark Andrew, and you can see it's a rounded, not sharp cannula with a small opening in it. And what happens is that warm saline at a particular temperature, a particular pressure, particular frequency of pulses is sent through this cannula, and at this opening, it draws in the mesenteric tissue, and it hydrolyzes and separates the connections between the fat cells. So they are literally sucked into the cannula, and the other connective tissue, nerves, and vessels are not affected. Key aspects of this, as well as its use, are patented through 2030, and patent extensions are being filed. The system has been FDA cleared since 2010, and that was for liposuction and subcutaneous fat removal. It has the cannula, which I showed you, a single patient use pump, which fits into the master console, and this is what the system consists of. Now, why are we pursuing our human trial? Well, in large part, it was based on a very successful non-human primate study, also funded by the NIH, which involved 11 obese, insulin-resistant baboons. Some of them were used to kind of finalize the settings for the system, and what finally went forward is that all of the animals who underwent MVL with this did well. 4 of them had 50 to 75% of their visceral fat removed, and all 4 of them were converted from insulin resistant to insulin sensitive. This study was also controlled. 2 baboons had sham surgery and matched feeding to 2 of the operated animals, and they had no improvement in insulin resistance. Good follow-up, good changes were documented out to about 1.5 years with no adhesions, no bowel damage, no pathology, and importantly, no reaccumulation of the mesenteric fat. And so this has been published. So what about our pilot trial? Well, we're looking to recruit 10 to 12 adult patients to undergo the MVL procedure. And the main criteria are an elevated A1C, that the patient has not been able to reach target goals despite taking at least 2 oral anti-diabetic drugs, BMI of roughly 30 to not quite 40, and diagnosed within the last 10 years. The main objectives of our study are primary, first, safety, lack of serious AEs, and secondly, improvement in glycemic control as measured by A1C, both at 6 and 12 months. This is a 1-year study. Secondary includes improvement in insulin sensitivity by the gold standard hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp, which is mechanistic, and then other measures, fasting glucose, oral glucose tolerance, time and range by continuous glucose monitoring, and body weight. This study is primarily funded, partly funded by a $1.2 million NIH grant, which was obtained by our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Mark Andrew. It is underway at UT San Antonio. All the surgeries are being performed by Richard Peterson, who is the head of bariatric surgery there, and who performed the baboon study surgeries with Dr. Andrew. The trial's clinical site PI is Ralph DeFranzo, who I think almost everybody knows for his groundbreaking and decades of work in type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Removal of mesenteric fat is fairly similar. I'm not going to go into the details. It's a combination of a small incision and laparoscopic viewing, and the total procedure is about 45 to 60 minutes. So we have had one patient so far go through the procedure. He did have an A1C of 8.8 and class 1 obesity, was resistant by clamp, and met the other entry criteria. He underwent the procedure about 11 months ago without intraoperative complications, and at 6 months showed a significant reduction in A1C, an increase in time and range by continuous glucose monitoring, and a very substantial decrease in his insulin resistance by clamp. Interestingly, his weight was not changed, so that is not accounting for these metabolic changes. Beyond 6 months, I will politely say that the patient's dietary intake has become variable, which he freely said to the clinicians there, that he was basically eating a lot at places like Taco Bell and Wendy's. And so there's less improvement in his A1C, but it is still less than at baseline. And he will undergo final testing with a whole raft of tests and imaging procedures at 12 months. So the company's medical leadership, I want to emphasize Dr. DeFranzo and Dr. Peterson as really, the quality of the external investigators we're working with, and Dr. Andrew, who invented this technology. In closing, I will offer that we believe we're taking a fairly novel and new approach to trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, which is now the largest health crisis in the world, surpassing infectious illnesses. And we believe we're well positioned to try to bring about a new solution to reversing type 2 diabetes. And I will just say that Brian Murray, whose contact info is shown at the bottom of the slide, is our Chief Financial Officer, and there's his email as well as his phone number, and he would be open for any inquiries. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Larry. That was great. Please remind us again, how much money are you guys looking to raise at this point, and what will that get us?
Yeah, so we're looking to raise, in the 1 to 2 million range, but I must confess I've been asked not to go into finances and to defer these types of questions to Brian Murray. So I'm gonna not put a hard number out there for you. Got it.
Well, thank you for the excellent presentation. And I think we're out of time, but anyone who wants can go into a breakout with Larry. So please let us know.